Welcome to the Black Entrepreneur Experience podcast, inside the business, buzz, and brilliance of Black entrepreneurs. Here is your host, Dr. Frances Richards.
What happens in Vegas goes all over the world on Black Entrepreneur Experience, episode number 122. Thank you for joining us as we elevate the Black entrepreneur experience by interviewing CEOs, thought leaders, innovative thinkers, and Black entrepreneurs across the globe. I'm your host, Dr. Frances Richards, and today we have Ray McKenzie. He's founder of Red Beach Advisors. They provide expert strategies for your business or your organization dealing with operations, finance, and technology. Ray, I have given our audience such a brief bio. I was reading your bio, and you have really such an extensive bio. So why don't you, first of all, let me welcome you to the show. I would be remiss if I didn't say that. So welcome, Ray.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you fill in the gaps? Share with our audience what you'd like them to know about you and your company.
All right. Sounds good. My name is Ray McKenzie. I'm the founder and managing director of Red Beach Advisors. Red Beach Advisors was started, we're approximately in year 4 now, but it was a combination of a lot of my corporate experience that I had for private and public companies throughout probably about 15, 16 years. Previously lived in San Francisco, lived in the Bay Area, worked with private and public companies, obviously of all sizes. Worked with public companies and ran global organizations, dealing with strategy, operations, delivery, account management, sales engineering, finance, kind of tech operations, network operations. And over the years of running a lot of those organizations, I picked up a base level of skills, some expertise in some areas where I'm really, really strong at. And I've seen the positives and the negatives across multiple businesses that they encounter. And I thought to myself, and I had how I fell into consulting was a different story in itself, but through the combination of all of those experiences and the people I've worked with and the lessons I've learned, I've turned that into Red Beach Advisors. So with Red Beach Advisors, I was actually working full-time for a company. They had relocated myself and my family to Los Angeles to do global strategy and service delivery. I happened to be in Europe pretty often, had staff in multiple places around the country, around the world. And with that, I started to receive a few calls from CEOs and executives that I had previous relationships with. And through those conversations, they were like, hey, we need you to come in and help our company kind of build, grow, and scale. They were smaller companies. They were looking at, expanding the different products in the different areas and different industries and verticals. And they needed someone who could come in and give them relatively good guidance across multiple departments in the proper way to do that. So while I was still in my full-time job, I also had these opportunities to do outside of consulting. Once I took those consulting opportunities at the same time and kind of dipped my toes in the water, I found out that's what I love to do. I like to work with innovative companies. I like to work with people who are looking at building, growing, and scaling. I like to work on multiple projects. I like to work with people I like. And so consulting gave me the opportunity to pick and choose what projects I wanted to work on versus those projects that I didn't want to work on. Or I was also able to dictate how much I wanted to charge. I also was able to dictate my calendar. I was also able to dictate when I wanted to work and where I wanted to work. And so as all of those came together, that's how Red Beach Advisors was started. And that was approximately almost 4 years ago, officially. And then obviously adding more and more staff, adding more and more clients and customers, and working on more projects with some great people. And that's my background with Red Beach Advisors.
You started talking about the story that how you got into consulting. Tell us your back end story.
So I'm from a small town. It's called Atwater, California, in the middle of the Central Valley, about 25,000 people. My parents were Air Force, and that's how we ended up there. Then I went to San Diego State and studied management information systems. Out of college, I thought I would be your typical network administrator or systems administrator. And I, was a back office IT guy. That's what my role is. That's what I thought my career was going to go in. Once I found out that my career in that area was dictated by other companies and their technology, whether it be Microsoft, and I was a Microsoft guy, Linux, and what they were doing in developing their software and operating systems and other technologies that were coming out, I felt that it would be better if I went into a more business type of role where I was supporting either a product or service and less being a back office person. With that, that's when I made the switch to leading tech operations groups as for startups. And my background is primarily in tech. It started with internet infrastructure, then it moved into cybersecurity and cyber fraud and cyber intelligence. Then it moved into identity and authentication. Then it moved into cloud computing and digital transformation. And so over the course of all of these years working for some of these really small companies and working for some of these global Fortune 500 companies, I've amassed a set of skills. And then I'm always looking for more and more people who have those same set of skills who can join my firm. And that's kind of how I fell into consulting. It was a mix of working in several different areas with several private and public companies, a mix of developing great relationships over the course of my career, the ability to, develop great communication skills and work on a lot of different projects, be flexible, and also on top of all of that, lead a lot of successful initiatives and measures within companies that yielded results to move companies forward.
And you talked about your staff, Ray. Are they virtual or are they all local?
They're typically virtual. Most are all in Southern California. So I'll put it that way. I've got one consultant that's based in San Diego. I've got one consultant that's here in Los Angeles. I've got another one that's here in Los Angeles. And then I've got a program manager that's based out of Los Angeles as well. We kind of work virtually. It allows us to kind of be flexible, control our schedules, be available for our clients and customers, be on site if we need to at certain times. And then I also have a wide network of other subcontractors and or partner firms that I'll work with as well to complete objectives, complete initiatives, maybe partner, work for to complete tasks.
Ray, one of the things you talked about, and I believe it may be your tagline about build, grow, and scale. And all businesses, that's primarily their objective. They want to definitely build, they want to grow, and they want to scale. Talk specifically, if you can, to, again, we know that this is the mission of all businesses, but I want you to talk specifically to Black entrepreneurs. And it appears that we have a challenge with the growing, the building, and the scaling. From your expertise, what advice can you give to help us move that needle further up the scale there?
Yeah, one of the challenges that a lot of companies have, and especially entrepreneurs, is that you need to move in a direction to where you're able to provide services, but it's not just you that's only able to provide the services. And that's always a problem. So you get a lot of solopreneurs, people that, run companies, but it's just them.
Right.
You get a lot of people that are maybe entrepreneurs and they may have one or two lower level people, or they're admin assistants, they manage the calendar, virtual assistants, things like that. But the key to kind of being able to generate more revenue for your company is the ability to, multiply your efforts through other people and have other people, execute tasks and become revenue generating individuals. So, and the only way to really do that is you have to develop, obviously, a streamlined process and procedure in terms of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how you're teaching other people to do so. And then you also have to find the right people who can execute. That's obviously a big thing. Finding people is a big part of the job of growing a company. You need to hire trustworthy, highly intelligent individuals who have a great work ethic. In terms of, building and growing and scaling, a lot of the challenges I see with small businesses, they don't necessarily have documented process or documented procedures or documented training or ways people can learn without sit and watch and learn through watching me how I do what I do. That's not always the best way for people to learn and to scale, simply because everybody learns in a different way. So if you have the outline of what you need in the business to move forward, then you're able to draft out the process and procedure and the training materials to actually train staff. Then you're able to find people that can execute and can carry out your vision and turn them into revenue generating individuals. That's how you build successful companies.
How do you vet those individuals when you talk about finding trustworthy employees?
Throughout my career, I've probably hired more than 2,500 people. And I probably interviewed more than 15,000 people throughout my career. I typically start with how I feel about a person, and that's very subjective to understanding what they're doing. But there's a couple of things, and I tell a lot of people this, that I can't teach. I can typically teach people how to do a task or how to work with a program or how to work with a software or how to communicate with people over the course of time. But I can't teach somebody how to show up on time, and I can't teach somebody how to have a great work ethic. Those are things that are kind of inherent within people. You either have it or you don't, or you understand it or you don't. With that being said, how I try to evaluate people for the role is it starts with defining what exactly you want that person to do. And as a business owner, you have to outline what you want people to do. You have to know exactly what they do so that when they do start doing the job, you and the employee have a clear understanding as to what they need to execute on from a day-to-day perspective. I see a lot of companies that say, hey, we need to hire someone. And they hire someone and then they have that person wanting to do something completely different. And then there's just a fundamental disconnect that occurs. That happens often. It usually needs to start with leadership to say, this is what we want to hire. This is the job description. This is what we want them to execute. These are the goals. This is the level of performance we want them to meet. Then you go out and you find somebody who has kind of the entry of the background that fits that position. There's a big discussion in terms of people with degrees and people without degrees. I think, if somebody has the degree, obviously that gives them a bit of a jump start in terms of a background. But then you also need to have the functional work experience to be able to execute on those tasks. So it's a balance between the two. Once you find people that have resumes that, are comparable and matched to the job description, then you bring those people in, meet them in person, have a great conversation, get a good feel for them. I always, in the interview process, I try to ask the last question. I let them give me their background, give me kind of their positives and negatives in terms of their experience. But I also tend to ask people and kind of have them do their own SWOT analysis on themselves, and a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats on themselves in real time, which is tell me 3 things that you're strong at, tell me 2 things that you're not strong at. A big thing for me is self-realization. You need to understand that you're not good at everything. Like some people can say, hey, I'm not good at one thing, but 2 things, that opens it up and makes them a little bit vulnerable. And then I asked them a few off-the-wall questions. What do you like to do outside of the office? What are your hobbies? What keeps your interest? And then maybe an off-the-wall question about some technology or something, or their opinion on something that's entertainment related or sports related, and try to keep it light. But that gives you insight into their background, how they feel about themselves, how they can, acquiesce to culture perhaps, and also how they're able to communicate, and that's a big thing, and you want to see how people can communicate, how people look at themselves, what people feel they're strong at, and that gives a very good, clear picture in terms of that person as a person.
What was that aha moment that you knew that your business was going to be successful?
Gosh, being an entrepreneur is a bit difficult. So because I'll say, I started my firm and I had worked 16 years in corporate America. So it's kind of all I knew. I started out and I said, I wanted to climb the corporate ladder. I wanted to eventually go and be part of the C-suite and be CEO, COO, CTO. That's kind of the path I was on. And what I found was I was really young in the position, in the level of success I had in a corporate world. I was very young and I had had a lot of success very early, whereas a lot of people that I was in the same room with for meetings, they were much older than me. They had had more years of experience than me, but I was outperforming them. So in doing so, I was like, well, there has to be a way that I can elevate myself to the C-suite. And that's how I started Red Beach Advisor. Year one for me was relatively easy. Year one was the year of, I started my company with clients. So they were already calling me saying, hey, we need your services. Let's work out a contract. Let's work out a services agreement and come in and help. So year one was relatively simple. Year two was like the realization that business is tough. Contracts do end, service engagements do end, and you have to examine your weaknesses and say, gosh, what do I need to get strong at? How do I improve? So year two for me was the year of real growth, whereas year one it's typically the year for growth for a lot of entrepreneurs. Year two was that year where I had to go read books and I had to go listen and learn, and I had to learn in real time. And in year two ended fantastic. I want to say the end of year two is the year to where I was like, I'm on to something. That was when I had developed great relationships. I had a network of partners. I had obviously a great reputation with several companies. I was kind of putting all the pieces together. And so year two was that moment to where I was going out and I was pitching my company and I was getting great responses. And, with great responses came more and more recommendations, more and more introductions, and business has been great.
What problem exists in the world today that you would like to solve?
A big problem I would like to solve is the ability for easy access to financial literacy tools for people, for typically younger people. I want to say between the ages of 15 to, 25 to 30. A lot of us that grew up, whether it be middle class or lower class, or, you grew up really poor, and the lessons about how money works are not readily available for those people. And that's a problem because, the people that are not taught how money works or how finance works, they go through a life of that. And that, continues a cycle of not teaching that or not passing along those lessons. So a problem that I would like would be somebody to solve, the ability to give a lot of financial literacy lessons down to, the middle and the lower class and the underprivileged, and teach them at a young and early age, this is how, money works. This is how you can make money work for you. These are the things how you can make early stage investments. These are how you can make late stage investments. This is the stock market. This is the difference between these different banks. This is what an interest rate is and what it means to you. This is the difference between, stocks in terms of dividends and all those important facets of understanding finance, and make it as a simple and easy level for everybody to understand, and not make the mystery of finance just something that, the privileged have access to.
I agree with you 100%. And you would be happy to know that I've interviewed on a couple of the shows. There's a couple of young people, like super, super young, 9, 10 years old, that's doing some financial literacy. I interviewed a son, he's a teenager, and his mom, they were doing financial literacy and generational wealth. And then another gentleman, his show actually just aired, Evan Leaphart, his show just aired last week, and he does financial literacy for young people, and he's in the Florida area. So I agree with you 100%, and it really needs to start at a very young age, and those conversations need to be had in the family, and it needs to be over dinner quite often and not something that we're afraid to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's one of the things that, we need to talk about in regular conversations. One of the challenges I've always had, or I see, is that, there was a previous concept of what was called the digital divide before, and I'm not too sure if you're familiar with that or not.
Yes,
but
I
the
am.
digital divide was obviously the access to technology and the internet and knowledge and things that were shared by people that had the ability to have access to those tools. Well, the digital divide has changed now because now everybody has access to the internet. If you have a phone, you have access to it. But the divide is no longer the access. It's now how we actually consume what's out there on the internet. And so, we need to get through a portion of now we have access and everybody has cell phones and everybody can get on Facebook and everybody can get on, Google and everybody can get on Twitter. But the difference is you need to change what you consume in terms of not just focusing on media and entertainment or gossip news or music and things like that, but also start to take advantage of researching companies, researching how things work across the world, researching interest rate, researching currencies, and taking a look at what's happening across the world globally from a news perspective, governments, industries, technology, and start to consume that. And then that will change a lot of the conversations that we have in our household.
And you're absolutely correct. And I like how you said that, Ray, about the digital divide. And I remember when I started out in technology many years ago, and that was a big thing that Jesse Jackson was wanting to lower the gap, annihilate the gap. And one of the missions of our podcast is to eliminate the wealth gap. And in our communities, there's so many gaps. And one of the things that was so profound that you mentioned was that we all, or a lot of us, have access to the internet with our cell phones. There are still rural areas that are struggling with the whole digital divide. And you're so right about what we're consuming. And one of the things that I look at is, I say about our community is, I hate to use that terminology, we're a day late and a dollar short, but it's about access to information and how you're using the information that you have access to. And so where we are looking at Google and Facebook, they have now moved to AI, artificial intelligence, and EI, emotional intelligence, and using it in a whole nother way. So we have to stay abreast to not only the information, but how can we translate that information into dollars and cents?
Yes, definitely. It's you have to. I read a lot of the news. I still am up on a lot of pop culture and things like that. But it's about moving your focus in certain areas to focus on what's really happening, not today, but what are people building for the future. And we have access to that information, but we just have to start to take advantage of that access. Use the phone. I was in a meeting recently, and I was in Charlotte, North Carolina. And, I invested in the stock market, and I follow the stock market, and I obviously do my research on companies. But this was actually the first time I was in a meeting. And once the markets opened, a gentleman's phone rang off, a buzzer, letting him know that the stock market was open. And that's one of the things that in all the conversations I've had, that's the first time I've seen that happen. And that's something that we should adopt, which is we now know the markets are open. We know kind of what's trending. We know news is happening. We know companies are reporting earnings. They're giving out a lot of information, but that lets you know what the focus is. Instead of me getting a buzz alert for somebody's trivial post on Facebook, I'm getting notification about actual news that's happening in the movement of money. That was just something that was interesting.
That is wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. Ray, tell us what you are most grateful for now in your life.
Gosh, I'm most grateful for my family. I think, everybody being happy and healthy and being able to spend time with them. My wife and I have been together 18 years. We've been married for 18 years. We've been together for 20. We have 4 kids. Our oldest son is 18. He's a freshman in college in New York. Then we have a 10-year-old son and 8-year-old twins, 1 boy, 1 girl. So household is busy, household is active, but everybody's happy, everybody's healthy, and they're doing well in school, and I get to spend a lot of time with them. I think part of my movement to being an entrepreneur was quality of life, not just in terms of running my own company, but the ability to choose when and where I wanted to spend time and with whom. And so in being that, I think I'm most grateful for definitely my family, their support, their understanding, because I'm on the road a bit, but also that they're happy and they're able to pursue their dream.
Ray, what is one valuable lesson you wish you knew before starting your business?
The valuable lesson is learn what you're not good at and either find somebody who's good at it and pay them to help you, or read a lot of books. It's the best thing. My career, I was a back office guy for the most part. I wasn't a salesperson. So while I supported sales and had different roles in professional services and sales engineering and account management, and I was in front of customers and clients all the time, for me, my weakness was sales. My weakness was learning how to complete the sales process, sales cycle. So I had to go out and I functionally taught myself how to do that in year 2. I read books, I listened to podcasts, I listened to other people's pitches. Trial and error is a big thing. Reviewing other people's proposals and taking the best from other proposals. So I had to learn to sell. Some people, on the flip side, are very good at selling, and that's what they come from. But they may not be as good with the operational side of the finance side of the business. And understand what you're good at and what you're not good at. And that comes back to that self-realization concept that I spoke about earlier. Be honest with yourself. Know what you're good at, know what you're not good at. If you're not good at it, can you learn it? Do you have time to learn it? If you can't learn it, hire somebody who already knows it and pay them accordingly. If you do have time to learn it, buckle down, go ahead, move it forward.
You talked about finance. How did you finance your business?
Throughout my career, I saved up and saved the money up and decided to put it towards the business. So that's how I financed it. It's out of pocket, completely out of pocket. And I started my company with $2,000 in a laptop. So, I built my own website. Well, $2,000 in a laptop. So that $2,000 went to obviously creating my legal entity. That went to specific items to grow the business, of course, memberships and networking communities, things like that, and different tooling. But for the most part, I also leveraged relationships I had over 16 years that I had built, and people were willing to help me or build my websites for free, or help me learn some collateral or send me books or make introductions. So I didn't have to do things like pay for a lot of marketing materials. I didn't have to pay for a lot of Google AdWords. I bootstrapped it. And through bootstrapping it, I've been able to have some relative success. And so the money that I made, I've always continuously tried to put that back in the business.
Ray, what is a technology tool or a technology platform that is a must-have for you in managing your business day to day?
QuickBooks. I'm not necessarily a great bookkeeping person, whether it be QuickBooks or whether it be another type of tool like QuickBooks. I don't want to sway everybody to go use QuickBooks. But at the same time, I'm not a huge bookkeeping person. And, when I was in the corporate world, I would accumulate expenses and I'd have receipts and all that stuff. I hated doing expense reports. I hate it. And so I'm not a great bookkeeper, but QuickBooks makes it really easy as a business owner to run your business, do invoicing, manage your expenses, link your credit cards to QuickBooks to track all your transactions. Obviously, you can share it out with your CPA when it's tax time. So QuickBooks is extremely important to running your business, simply because you need to understand the financials, the profit and loss, your balance sheet, assets and liabilities, and also incoming receivables. Your AAP and AR is important, but you also need to be able to make it easy for your record keeping for your taxes when they come due. QuickBooks has helped me immensely on the finance side of running the business. And so that would probably be the most important tool.
Ray, what is a daily or a weekly habit that you do consistently that has given you the greatest success?
I'll give you two things. The first thing is I wake up and go to the gym. I work out in the morning. I do my best based upon my schedule, but I try to work out at least 6 days a week, 7 days a week at least. It allows me to get my mind going. It allows me to have a higher level of energy. It allows me to have a higher level of focus during the day and motivation. The one thing I've noticed in watching a lot of people when I'm in the gym is nobody leaves the gym with a frown or upset. Everybody leaves the gym typically with a smile after they're done accomplishing something. So, that gives me a jump start to be able to accomplish something early in the morning. The second thing is I have a daily to-do list. I physically write down the task of things I need to get done during the day. So in the mornings, I have a to-do list and I work off that to-do list. Obviously, during the day, more things are going to come up. So I write those down on the list. At the end of the day, whenever that may be, whether it be 6 p.m., whether it be 10 p.m., or whether it be 2 in the morning, I rewrite that list for the next day. So everything's not going to get done in one day. But if it doesn't get done, it carries over to the next day. And I write it down, so then when I complete it, I can scribble it off. And that's it. Those are the two things.
Ray, what are you reading right now?
Gosh, I've got one book that's sitting right here is Napoleon Hill's Keys to Success, the 17 Principles of Personal Achievement. Then I've got another book I'm reading, which is called What the Heck is EOS? That's EOS. And that's kind of an operational strategy book. Kind of an operational process and procedure book. It's methodology that's put into companies. And then I'm also reading a book called Venture Deals. And that's based upon, helping a lot of smaller companies either gain VC funding or what the insight is from venture capitalists and how they evaluate deals and how you can negotiate deals.
Who are your top two influencers in your life and what lessons do they teach you, Ray?
Gosh, in my life, I'd say, one, my father. He worked hard. So work ethic was a big thing. That's where I get kind of the statement of, having a good work ethic. You need to have that. And I learned that from him. Other influencers, I could say, I follow quite a bit of people, in terms of Instagram and things like that. Obviously, I have my own people that within my network that I'm inspired by. But Mark Cuban is one that I follow as an entrepreneur. Richard Branson is another one. Damon John is also a big one. Gary Vaynerchuk is another one, simply because, he's getting after it every day. Robert Smith of Vista Equity Group, I'm trying to follow things that, he's doing and how that group is progressing. And interesting enough, I almost had the opportunity in my corporate career to work for one of his companies. So those are some of the people that I follow on a regular basis and try to make sure I pay attention to. Another person is also Damon Dash, which is interesting enough, simply because even though he comes from a music and entertainment world, his background is being an entrepreneur. And the messages and kind of the persistence and kind of the motivation, he's really great at that.
If we can switch gears for a minute, let's talk risk. Can you share with us the worst moment in business and what was the takeaway?
I'd say for me, starting a business is always risky. I think the worst moment in business for me would have probably been, I wasn't a sales guy. So going out and hearing no the first time from somebody I was proposing services for. That was like the worst moment. I think it was because it was like, what's next? It's more of a, you learn that it's not a one shot gig. You've got to develop a full sales funnel. You've got to develop 5 to 10 different opportunities you're pursuing at a time. You've got to get out there and dial for dollars sometimes. You've got to get out there and what I call shaking hands and kissing babies. You've got to, develop solid relationships. And that was kind of the big shocker for me, was hearing that note, because like my background, I started my business with clients. That's how it was born. It was born out of having clients. So then when you're trying to go get new clients and you hear no, it's okay, how do I feel about this? Do I just, do I pack it in, or do I just keep going, or what do I do? And that was kind of the big shocker. The big risk for the business, I think for me is, I think you have to always keep, as an entrepreneur, you have to keep your eyes on a lot of different pieces of business. And if an area lags, it can come back to bite you in the future. So finance, accounting, bookkeeping is one. Obviously, not keeping a detailed sales funnel is another. Always making sure that, your contracts are right, and, you're delivering great service, and customer service is a big thing. Those are all big risks within the business and things you have to keep your eye on.
Ray, if someone spent a whole day with you, what is something that they would learn about you that we don't know?
Simple thing. I have probably OCD. Like I don't have papers strewn out everywhere. Everything's typically organized on my desk. But also, to that point, I also have the ability to adapt very quickly to changing circumstances. So I can handle lots of different conversations at the same time. I can handle phone calls at the same time. I can bounce from task to task at different times, take phone calls and then not interrupt my day in terms of getting back to focus. That's something that I just have an inherent trait to be able to do. Some people typically need to be heads down, focus, and not be interrupted. I have the ability to handle multiple tasks at one time, handle it all relatively well, communicate well, and keep things going and snap back and get back to focusing on what I need to focus on. So it can be, I'm getting multiple texts, I'm getting phone calls, I've got obviously my to-do list, I've got emails coming in. I'm able to manage all of that, delegate it to my staff, move projects forward. I'm able to kind of keep a lot of things moving at the same time.
Ray, talk about your most memorable moment in life or business.
I think in life or business. I think for me, in life, the one thing I've learned is, and this is in another gentleman's book that I read, but I had already kind of knew, is that, what's meant to be will be. But with that, you also need to carry yourself appropriately to be able to drive some of that stuff forward. So you have to be positive. You have to keep your eyes open. You have to look for the best in items. But probably the most memorable moment in life was, I think I wouldn't say stumble upon my wife. And I say stumble upon my wife because, we met in the most random of places. We've been together ever since. So that's kind of on the personal side, I'd say that. The most memorable side in terms of business would be the day I chose to step away from the corporate life, which I had known for 15, 16 years, and saying, I'm going to start this business and I'm going to make it work. And that was a huge step because I was living the life of the W-2 employee, the paycheck every 2 weeks, the corporate stock bonuses once a year, the corporate, RSUs and stock options. And that's what I knew. And then to step away from that and, tell the wife, hey, I'm going to start my business, I'm going to move it forward. That was probably the most memorable day.
What advice would you give someone that's listening and they're saying, I'm about to make that transition? What would you tell them to do?
Persevere and don't stop. But also make sure you have something that people want. There's a difference between an entrepreneur that builds something that they want and an entrepreneur that builds something that other people want. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that want to start a company for a problem that they have. And they're like, hey, this is a problem I have. I need to solve this problem. Let me start this company. Let me build this product. Let me develop this tech. And then you go out and people don't want to buy it. People aren't willing to pay for it. Develop a company or product or service that people are willing to pay for. That is the key. And stick to it. I think if you can get one person to pay for it, you can get 10 people to pay for it. If you can get 10 people to pay for it, you can get 100 people to pay for it. If you can get 100 people to pay for it, you can get thousands of people to pay for it. Prove and justify your market, your product, and your service. And if you do that and you stick to it, you'll have a business. This doesn't come easy. You just have to persevere and keep working towards it.
That was a great value bomb. Ray, if you conducted this interview, what is the one question that you would have asked yourself? And I'd like you to ask the question and answer it also.
For me, the question I would ask is, I would say, how did you learn to develop? What's the primary key component to you believe in almost any business? And then how did you learn and develop that skill? And to answer that question is relationship building and developing trust. So the one thing that I learned in business throughout my career is relationships are almost paramount to everything else. You can have a bad product, but if you have a great relationship with somebody will pay for it and they'll give you feedback to improve your product. If you have a great relationship with somebody, you can mess up and still repair what's occurring with your product and service. If you have a great relationship, it can open the doors to other introductions and other people and other ways to do business. And you can learn. Relationships are paramount. Develop good relationships. So through developing good relationships, for me, I've been able to cultivate a lot of these. I keep in touch with a lot of people. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I try to follow people's careers. I not only pay attention to their careers, but in conversations with them, I try to pick up on things that were similar or interesting items that we can discuss at a future date. So, if somebody says, gosh, I've got a daughter, my daughter's name is, Shelby, then I'm able to, next time I talk to them, be like, hey, how's your daughter? How's Shelby doing? How's she doing in school? So relationships are not always about business. A lot of it is business and personal. And the ability to show that, you've paid attention to them, you've listened to what's important to them, but also can recall that in the future and develop that personal and professional relationship will help you grow your business by leaps and bounds. And that has helped me immensely, is being able to have that skill to develop relationships.
Do you equate that building relationships and developing good relationships? Do you equate that to why you had success at a very early age and an early stage of your career?
Interesting enough, I'd say no. I'd say while I had the ability for me to have a lot of success early on in my career was just my work ethic, was the willingness to be able to work 12, 16, 18, sometimes 24 hours straight if I needed to. The company needed me to do that, or if my clients and customers needed that to happen. I would go above and beyond my job to make sure a good job was happening. That would be the first bit of it, was I displayed a great work ethic, and then displaying that good work ethic, it garnered a level of trust within people within the company. And then that trust led to building more relationships with them. Okay, so it's a combination of show and prove, then being able to trust you, and then continuing to cultivate that relationship.
Ray, tell us one of the most vital, life-changing piece of advice that you would like to share with the audience as our last question.
Take risk. It's important to believe in yourself and bet on yourself and take risk. At a certain point in your career, sometimes, I reached a point to where I said I could always go back and get a job. So I could always go back and go get a job. I could always pick up a phone and call some CEOs and get a job. I could also put my resume out there and more than likely get a job. The opportunity and the ability to start a company was something that happened. It was a moment in time to where I was like, hey, yeah, I'm going to take this risk and I'm going to go out and make it happen. Be willing and open to do that. Don't let your risk hold you. Don't let your lack of risk or your lack of risk tolerance or your trepidation or belief in yourself hold you back from making that jump sometime. I'd say always work with people and talk to people and get some insight and get feedback from people who, can give you feedback on what you're trying to do or your ideas. It's always a good thing. Sometimes it's okay to take risks. Sometimes it's okay to jump out there and do it. Sometimes it's okay to start a business and work at it and work at it and work at it. You can have your job and you can start your business at night. There are no shortcuts. If you have a podcast and you want 100,000 listeners on your podcast, you've got to interview, you've got to pump it out, you've got to promote, you've got to market, you've got to develop content. There's no shortcuts to saying, hey, I'm going to get 100,000 users or viewers or listeners on my podcast. There's no shortcut. It's just, take risks and be ready for the hard work. That would be it.
Ray, we've come to the part of our interview. It's called Fun Facts Lightning Round. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions and I'd like you to give us very quick answers. If there's something you desire not to answer, feel free to say pass. Are you ready for the Fun Fact Lightning Round?
Yeah, let's see how it goes.
All right, Ray, the last movie you saw?
It was called The Highwayman.
And you relaxed doing what?
Going to the gym, boxing.
Your favorite singer or rapper?
My favorite singer is going to be Keith Sweat. And my wife is going to laugh at that.
Your favorite dance song?
I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. So I'll have to skip that one. But I've got a lot of them. I just can't pick just one off the top of my head.
What food you eat every week, no matter what?
Tacos.
And your favorite month?
June. That's my birthday month.
Ray, before we let you go, you have a launch that's coming up. Do you want to share with our audience about that?
Yeah, one of the things we're working on with Red Beach Advisors is what we want to do is we want to give the knowledge that we have down to entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, and people that are just starting out their companies or businesses or throwing out ideas. So one of the things we're actually going to start is a business consulting as a service model to where people can go to www.redbeachadvisors.com and sign up for business consulting access at a low monthly cost. It's going to be $20 per month for an entrepreneur. They're going to be able to communicate with some of our consultants via email only and ask questions if they're a member of the service. And so they'll be able to receive, at this point, I believe our model is going to be, 3 to 4 different questions per month to help them drive their business forward via email from some of the Red Beach Advisors consultants. And so the key is we want to be able to provide the ability and knowledge to people who can't necessarily afford our services. We have a high monthly rate. We have a high hourly rate. And so, if you're just starting out your company or you're just starting out your business, you need to put your money into other areas like marketing, like product development, like website development, maybe also to your CPA, maybe also to legal. And so for that, there's gaps that companies have that we're able to provide responses for. And so that will get launched on www.redbeachadvisors.com. and people will be able to sign up as an entrepreneur, sign up for a package, and be able to receive access to consultants on our side.
And how else can they reach you? You had mentioned you were on other platforms if they wanted to reach out. Can you give all your handles?
Yeah, definitely. I'm obviously Instagram. It's Red Beach Advisors. I'm also on Twitter at Red Beach Advisors. Also on LinkedIn, Red Beach Advisors. You can also add me on LinkedIn and look up Raymond McKenzie. So it's www.linkedin.com/IN/Raymond McKenzie. And also all the information is on our website, which is www.redbeachadvisors.com. And you can always email us at info@redbeachadvisors.com, or you can give us a call at 424-247-6143.
Ray, that is a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us and spending part of your day with us on Black Entrepreneur Experience Podcast. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed the experience.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening and subscribing to Black Entrepreneur Experience. We would love for you to leave a review and rating on iTunes and share with your friends. For show notes and more episodes, go to www.beepodcast.com. Join us next Wednesday, and remember, green is the new black. So keep your bank accounts and your business in the black.